You're listening to Player Development, a channel focused on the intersection of sports and character growth. Please like and subscribe to support the stories being shared, the growth of our listeners, and to stay up to date with our latest content. Jake Delaney is an assistant basketball coach at Gardner-Webb University. He played college ball at Covenant College and went on to coach at both the Division I and Division III levels. Jake joins us today to share how he intentionally makes coaching a ministry.
All right, Jake, thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciate you taking time during your off-season workouts to spend the time with me, share a little bit about what's been going on with your life and your involvement in sports. So for our listeners, if you could please give a bit of your sports background and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, man. It's awesome what you're doing, interviewing these different coaches and different people, and so I'm excited to be on. And so just my background, I grew up playing basketball. I ended up getting a chance to go to Covenant College in Georgia. That's where we met, obviously, and played 3 years of college basketball there. And then my senior year, I actually was a student assistant, kind of due to some injuries. And so finished out my time there. Spent 2 years as a graduate assistant at Gardner-Webb. And then actually had a chance to come back to Covenant as a full-time assistant and worked for Neil Young for 2 years. And then had a chance to come back to Gardner-Webb after those 2 years as an assistant here. And so I just finished my second year as an assistant at Gardner-Webb under Coach Kraft, who was the same coach when I was a graduate assistant. And so yeah, I've had kind of been bouncing back and forth between those two schools, and it's been great. Learned a lot along the way. And Coach Kraft, the coach I work for now, he's big time, and I learn a ton from him every day. So I'm really thankful to be here.
Awesome, man. And this wasn't one of the questions I prepped you for, but, knowing that you sat out your senior year because of injuries, and maybe the student assistant position was kind of a natural outlet, what helped you decide to keep going with coaching after you graduated?
Yeah, so I think when I was in college, I just knew there was one thing I was really passionate about. It was I loved sports, and I really loved basketball. And I loved people, and I kind of liked dealing with people. And so I knew that coaching was always a possibility. And in a lot of ways, I think that was kind of the Lord working in the background and just starting me off early. And so I got a small taste as a student assistant working for Coach Taylor. And after that, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And like I said, I kind of had already had thoughts that there was a chance I wanted to coach long term. And so, but I did know that I wanted to at least go be a graduate assistant somewhere and kind of really get my full taste of what it's like to be a college basketball coach. Just because as a student assistant, it was a little different. I mean, all those guys that I was kind of helping out with, I was currently living with, and those are my teammates the year before. So it was just a unique situation. And then when I was a GA, that kind of really helped me realize, all right, this is what I want to do. So.
All right. And let me transition to your time as an athlete and as a coach now. What are some of the habits or traits that you developed through all of that time?
Yeah, I think, my time as a player in college and then as a graduate assistant were really vital for kind of developing certain things in my life that are really helpful for me now. And I think the first thing that I learned, especially as an athlete, was just discipline from training. And when I was going into my sophomore year, that was probably my first summer in off season where I really invested all in on my game in all areas, in the weight room, getting in the gym, basically every day. And people say that all the time, I get in the gym every day, but it really was. I mean, that was the summer for me. I was in there every morning, usually playing pickup. I would go lift in the afternoon, and then I would play pickup, or then I would, at some point later in that day, go get shots up and get more of like a skill workout in with someone in town. And that was just like an everyday process. And from that, what I saw was results, right? So like, I got to see what happens when you really, commit to the process and make it a daily discipline, to get better in whatever area it is. And so, that just translates to every area of your life, right? Like you get what you put in. And, I think from that, I just learned like what it takes, right? So like in my job now, like when I'm not doing enough, I know, right? You just know there's that like inner conscious, like guilty conscious of, hey, you're not doing enough. You know what it takes because you've done it before, right? And so like, I think for me, that's helped set a standard in my life of like, hey, this is how hard you're going to work, and this is what it takes to be really good as a player and now as a coach, right? So like, and so learning from that as a player was really helpful. And then as a graduate assistant, I think what helped me there was, it was my first like experience on the other side of things as a coach in terms of the amount of hours that go into this whole thing, right? And so, as a player, you just have no idea. You show up for practice, you kind of worry about yourself, outside of practice and what you got to do. And then you show up, you get told what to do, and that's kind of how the season goes. And then as a coach, it's everything else. You got to tell them what to do at all times. You're always preparing. You're preparing for games, opponents, you're recruiting. There's just so much that goes on behind the scenes. And so, I think as a GA I really got thrown into that fire and had to adjust right away. And then the last thing I would say as a player, like I had mentioned, so I didn't play my senior year of college. And that was really hard for me. Like I loved basketball. I loved playing. I had put everything I had, into that whole deal. And so, I had a hip injury after my junior year. I had surgery, and as I recovered, I kind of, a bad back injury basically developed, and I couldn't really bend over. And so, you can't do that. You're not going to be able to play. And so I was kind of forced into this, early retirement, I guess you could say, in quotations. And that was a lot of adversity for me. I think it was just the hardest thing I had had to deal with in my life up to that point. And I was at this point of like, all right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? And so for me, I think two things came from that. One, I learned I love coaching, but two, and I think the most important part was like, God really flipped my life upside down in that year and was like, hey man, your identity is completely wrapped up in you as a basketball player, which is hilarious because it's not like I was playing at Duke, but that's just how my mind was. And that's what I put everything into. I wanted to get recognition from it. I wanted to be good at it. And that's kind of where my identity lied. And it wasn't until basketball got taken from me that he showed me that. And so I really think after that year, that was when my faith really started to grow and it became my own, and I really started to understand what it looks like to put your identity in Jesus Christ. And so that was, a challenge that I went through, but dealing with that adversity for me is that made me stronger. And it's helped me since with the different challenges that I've had to face in my life since. So I know that was a lot, but that's kind of things that I've learned from as an athlete and as a young coach. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've touched on this a little bit, but if you have a little more, build on how some of these habits, this discipline, grounding your identity in Christ. How does that carry over into other parts of your life outside of it?
Yeah, so I talked about discipline, right, just from training. And so the most important thing from that I've learned is just discipline in my faith. And not in a legalistic way, by any means, but learning how to be disciplined in my actions and getting in the Word. And, over the last 5 years, that's become a huge part of my life is my time in the Word. And it's become a discipline, but it's something I want to do and I look forward to doing. But I do think that, learning how to commit to something and what I learned as an athlete, I think that kind of translated into my faith. Because I look at my job as a coach as a ministry. That's why I do what I do. And so, for me, I think that's such a big deal. And having discipline in that area is so important because just like I talked about as a player, in your identity getting wrapped up as a player, the same thing can happen whether you're in coaching or not, but in coaching too, just your identity can get wrapped up there. So for me, staying grounded in that is really important. Discipline in my job, it's just like an everyday, coaching never stops, right? And so you got to be disciplined with your time and disciplined in how you work. A lot of times outside of your time in the office, on the phone, recruiting, all those things. And so it's helped me in that way. And then I kind of hit on again earlier. I said, I kind of know now what I kind of understand what it takes, at least as an assistant. And so when I'm not giving my best effort, I know because my experience and the experiences I've had in the past are going to trigger, and it's going to let me know, hey, you're not doing enough, right? And so those have kind of carried over into other parts of my life, but in terms of, just outside my job, my faith, but then also my job as a coach. So.
Absolutely. Thanks for building on that a little bit. And so you've already kind of talked about some of the challenges you faced in your senior year with your identity as a basketball player getting kind of taken away from you, like you said. Talk about a challenge that you faced. Maybe it's that one or another one that you were thinking of, and how did you meet that challenge?
Yeah, I think I guess what I had prepared was talking about my senior year, but I'll talk about something else because I really kind of hit that one already a good bit. But my first year as an assistant coach, so this would be my first year at Covenant after I was a graduate assistant. One of the things that I came to realize really quick was that there was a lot I didn't know. And I felt like as I was going into that job, I'm like, I played here. I know Division III basketball. I just came from Division I. Like, yeah, I got to learn how to recruit and all those things. But I'm like, this should be, like, I felt comfortable, right? And because as a graduate assistant, there's not a ton of coaching. It's a lot of grunt work. You'll do some player development, some stuff like that here and there, but your staff is so big, you're really handling a lot of the behind the scenes work, and you're kind of paying your dues in a lot of ways, which is really good. And so, which is part of the reason why I wanted to go to Covenant, because I knew I was going to be the only assistant, so I was going to have to do a lot. But again, I kind of thought it was going to be easier than I anticipated. And when I got there, I learned quick that there's a lot I didn't know, and I think one of the areas I really struggled in was like my voice on the court, right? And so like how to coach and lead guys and do it in a confident manner and gain guys' respect on the court, whether that's in a drill or a timeout or in the locker room or whatever. And I think I was dealing with a lot of just insecurities, just wanting guys to respect me, all those kind of things. And so, I think that was just a challenge that I faced, that over that year, I had to accept that, hey, this is something I'm not good at, and be honest with myself. And then after that, I could just go from there, right? And so by my second year, my year one and year two at Covenant, I would say were night and day in terms of my comfortability as a coach, comfortability in who I was, and what Coach Young was asking me to do and my role on the staff and all those things. And so I think there was a lot of growth there, but it definitely was a challenge for sure. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That transition between two very different types of basketball programs and levels of basketball programs.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it important for you to have faced that challenge?
Say that again?
Why was it important or significant for you that you faced that particular challenge?
I think it's important because for me, for two reasons. One, just like practically as a coach, that's just something that you have to be good at. When you're coaching guys on the court and you're directing people and directing players, and you got to be able to vocalize things, communicate, be confident in what you're doing, and that's really important. And then I think the biggest thing is learning about self-awareness and continually applying that to my life, and being willing to be honest with myself about here are areas that I need to get better at, and being able to address those things and then figure out how can I get better at those things, right? And so, and I think that's a constant thing that we're all going through. And I think it's really important as leaders that we are self-aware, we're willing to be honest, and then willing to figure out how can we improve in those areas. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I feel like that year for me was really important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Jake, that's all the questions I have for you today. I'll kind of toss it back to you, give you the floor for kind of the final word on anything you might want to add or something to kind of tie this all up together.
No doubt. Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say, especially to it really can apply to anybody. But just what I've learned over the last 4 years, and this really developed when I was working for Coach Young at Covenant in my 2 years, was learning what it looks like to make your job, and in particular my job as a basketball coach, a ministry. And I think it's a really easy thing to say, and it's a much harder thing to do. And it takes a lot of intentionality, and you know, there's weeks when I'm doing that really well, and then there's weeks where I'm really focused on the wrong things. And usually the wrong things are focused on things like myself, you know, and but in my time at Covenant and then here at Gardner-Webb, I've just seen, if you really view it as a ministry and use your job in that way and look at it as a way to disciple the players that are playing for you, and even the staff and the other guys that work with you, the way that I've seen God kind of move through the different programs that I've worked in has been awesome. And again, it's really why I do what I do. I love basketball. I love the competitive side of coaching, but the ministry side is really why I do what I do. And so that's the challenge for me, is to make it that and keep it that. And so I guess my challenge for anybody listening is, I really do think, no matter where you work, you can look at your job as a ministry. It's going to look different in different areas. But to be able to do that, it's going to take some intentionality. But I know that I really think God calls us to that. And so, again, I'm not perfect at it, but that's my goal, and that's what I feel like God's convicted me with over the last few years. And so, yeah, that would kind of be my final thought.